Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thanks so much. Yeah, a little round of applause there. Thank you, Tammy. Big round of applause from that corner. Thanks so much for joining us at our very special program tonight at tonight's After Dark. My name is Sam. I'm one of the program developers who put together this lovely event for you. Thanks so much for being here. Yeah. I'm so thrilled that you're applauding that because the fun has just begun. I'm the least interesting person you're going to see on the stage tonight, so I'm glad that you're warmed up for that. Well, I don't know about that either. I'm curious, how many of you is this your first time visiting us here at Pier 15 for an After Dark? Well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll be curious to talk to you afterwards to hear what piqued your interest to come out tonight, but we do this week in, week out, and it's always a pleasure to welcome new faces to our space. And as we make that welcome, we're also reminded that we ourselves are also guests here on the land and the waters that we occupy. For continuing for tens of thousands of years, the Ramaytush Ohlone and people have been on this land, and it behooves us to take lessons from the way that they've stewarded it and to learn from them on how to create sustainable futures for the next 10,000 years. Tonight's show is a really exciting collaboration. We talk about After Dark. The theme tonight is point of view. And we think about that because we promote many different ways of looking at the world. And a lot of that we do is through science. Scientific knowledge is built from study after study by hundreds of thousands of people that come to these theories that can be tested and proven and tested and proven. But they all come from individuals. We really honor each individual as their own subject in observing. You are the best scientific instrument you have in the way that you see the world, your perspective. And so it was really great to get in touch with the Story Collider and work on this collaboration because their mission and what they do, bringing science storytelling to the world, is really in sympathy with what we like to do here, revealing the humanity behind science and honoring the stories of the people who do science just like you and me. So I'm going to leave it to them to wind you up for all the great presenters we have tonight, but I'm just so thrilled that we get to bring this type of storytelling to the stage for another window into how science works and why science matters. To give you a little preview of the show tonight, we have 5 storytellers. There will be one intermission after the third storyteller, so you'll have a 10-minute break to stretch, use the bathroom, grab another drink, and I want to thank our bartender, Steve, over there for being here tonight, taking care of us. The hosts have given permission that their stage time is less important than the storyteller's stage time, so if you do need to grab a beverage while they're introducing the acts in between, go ahead and do that. But of course, while our storytellers are on stage, we appreciate your full attention for what they're sharing with you. Otherwise, during that intermission, if you need to use the restroom, you can find one in the crossroads where you entered, or there's one in the lobby outside these doors if you need to go and do that. I also want to welcome our online audience here who's watching tonight, live streamed, and give gratitude to our AV and video team who have helped set up the live streaming and, of course, these microphones. Again, I'm looking forward to a really fun night with these 5 storytellers, and please help me welcome to the stage the Story Collider producers who have been coaching and are going to bring us into the act, Misha and Kayla. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. All right. We should probably introduce ourselves a little.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. How's it going tonight? Louder. Louder.
There we go.
You could be outside in the hail like I was earlier today. My name is Kayla Glenn, and I am a senior producer with the Story Collider.
And I'm Misha Gajewski, and I am the managing producer with the Story Collider.
Ooh, ooh.
Yeah.
We are both here joining you tonight from Canada or Canadian, eh?
Yeah. We are very sorry that we brought cold weather to you, but I don't know. You guys can deal with it, right? There we go.
They don't seem pleased.
They do
at
not.
all. No, just remember that where we're from, it's snowing a lot right now, like a lot.
So much. We have a delightful.
There you go. So it's going much better than it is for us up north. I'm actually from Vancouver Island, which is the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples.
And I'm from Toronto, which is the native lands of the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Wendat peoples.
Huron as well.
Huron-Wendat.
Huron-Wendat, yeah.
Nailed it.
Nailed that. So we want to thank all of you who are joining us here on these lands tonight and all of you who are joining us virtually. We're so happy to have you here with us and supporting our storytellers. This is a Story Collider show. How many people know what the Story Collider is?
Hold on. We need to set some ground rules just a little bit. Okay, so we are not at a lecture hall. I mean, it kind of seems like that, but it's not. The screen is up. There's no PowerPoints happening. So we applaud. We don't raise our hands. That is not a thing that we do. There we go.
Yes.
That's what I like to hear. Yes.
These are not lectures. Nobody's going to wait for you to raise your hands. You are encouraged to go meet the storytellers at intermission or after the show and ask them questions, but there is nothing formal about this. This is here to tell personal stories. You will laugh. You may feel yourself, cringe. You may feel yourself have some tears. That is normal, and please lean into that. Support our storytellers tonight. If you are vibing with them in any way, let them know. Let them hear you.
We love that. We love audible gasps. Those are my favorite. Just in general. But yeah, I think, okay, round of applause. Who's been to a Story Collider show before? There is someone in the audience. Love you. Thank you. All right. Who's totally new to Story Collider shows? Yeah. I like this. We got a ton of newbies.
It's good. Is anyone new to the Exploratorium other than us?
Ooh.
Oh, quite a few people. Okay, that's
Right.
awesome. Thanks for coming out and trying something new tonight.
We love new things. And I think that leads really well into our theme for tonight, which is curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Theme for tonight is curiosity. And basically, since I arrived in San Francisco, well, Misha went to bed immediately, so I had to entertain myself for a while.
Okay,
And
time zone difference. Give me a break.
It's kind of sad. She goes to bed at 9 p.m. usually, so it was late for her.
Shh, don't tell people that.
Very late for her.
Thank you.
Stayed up entertaining myself, Googling how San Francisco came to be, and ended up being very curious about the communities that were here before us and how it ended up being built. And yeah,
You just got really into it?
I Googled for an hour before I went to bed, so I'm pretty proud of myself.
You're real special.
Yeah, and then we got to come here tonight and get curious about the location. So
Yeah.
we were looking forward to so many things. I know actually being here was a highlight that you were
for
looking
sure.
forward
Okay,
to.
so you have to understand that literally everyone I talked to, when I told them I was coming out to San Francisco and going to the Exploratorium, they're like, the Exploratorium is the best thing ever. It's the most amazing place, right? Everyone just hypes it up so much, and I'm like, I mean, okay, but also, are you okay? Is it is it really that great? I don't know. What was your favorite science kind of museum exhibit?
Okay, so I have really high expectations because my favorite science exhibit that I've ever been to was actually at the Toronto Science Center, and they had a Harry Potter exhibit come in before there was Harry Potter World that you could visit. Yeah,
That's fair.
I'm a huge fan, and I got to get sorted by the hat, and I don't know how that relates to science, but I was so into it. So I was a bit skeptical coming to a science spot. I didn't know if it would really meet those expectations. But then tonight on the way here, our Uber driver was like, "Oh, you're going to After Dark?" We're like, "Yeah, have you been before?" He's like, "Yeah, it's awesome. I love the shadow thing." Like, "Oh,
Okay.
damn, this is a big deal." Okay.
Yeah. What was your favorite? So we've been kind of exploring before it opened for After Dark because we're special. But what was your favorite part?
So I was drawn to a few things. I mean, I have a background in natural sciences, so anytime I get to play with sand or look at windscapes, I mean, there's a big whale vertebra, that's kind of my thing.
That's your thing?
Yeah, that's my
You're a
thing.
whale
I
girl.
knew I'd be drawn to that, but then there was also this cool thing where I got to sit down and kind of it times how long it takes for a signal to reach your nerve through your sciatic nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of have wonky nerves, so I was curious, and just sitting there and playing with it was very meditative. But my favorite part, honestly, was when we were walking back when everyone else was pouring in and just watching them play
Yeah,
and
that was
having
pretty
that
cool.
that play was so childlike, and there's definitely joy on everyone's faces. I was like, oh, this is just a nice vibe. Yeah, I like being here.
That's fair. Yeah. Who else, round of applause, who else tried the Nerve thing while you were out there? Yeah, all right. Okay, who else saw the Batman thing where it looked like the penguins were swimming? That was so... I still don't understand it. If someone wants to explain that to me scientifically later, like, I'm here for it. Come see me. Please explain in detail all of the things. But thank you so much. I'm so excited. Okay, are we ready for our first storyteller? Yes. All right. So I'm bringing out my notes because I don't want to miss anything. Forgive me.
Some reminders before we introduce our first storyteller.
Okay.
So again, feel free to lean into whatever your feels are and support them while they're up on stage. We will ask that you refrain from going to get any drinks or making too much movement while they're up here. While we're up here, feel free to boogie and get yourself drinks. We don't mind at all.
If you find yourself accidentally learning, I mean, it happens a lot in this museum, but if you do find yourself accidentally learning, feel free to go get a drink. You got this. It's fine.
Another drink.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready now?
We're ready.
Okay, cool. So our very, very first storyteller, I want you to start getting ready. He is a geography. Wow, can't read today. We're having a great time. Geography and environmental science professor at American River College. He's a storyteller. You might have heard him on the Moth or Risk podcast or Armchair Expert. He's also a huge storyteller, and he does capital storytelling. So please give it up for John Aubert. Round of applause. Woo, woo!
So I'm standing alone on a remote, windswept patch of desert in eastern California, preparing to take a life. But let me back up a bit. So as a little kid, I was filled with this intense curiosity and desire to explore the world around me. And I was also sometimes a mischievous little dumbass. Like the time that I was told not to touch the electric fence at my grandparents' ranch. Of course I touched it. And then I cried. And then I touched it again. Or the time that I was doing advanced research in soil erosion with the high-pressure hose nozzle in my dad's flower beds. And he really didn't appreciate my research. So as much as, I'm sure they probably sometimes wanted to wring my neck, they really did try to foster my curiosity and nurture my desire to explore. So, perfect example. I'm 9 years old, and my parents take my sisters and I on a picnic to this little state park out in the Central Valley of California. And really, it's just this little patch of nature surrounded by hundreds of square miles of farmland. But as far as I'm concerned, it's virgin wilderness. It's basically the Louisiana Purchase. And so, the moment we get there, I jump out and I head off on patrol because, I got to go discover some shit for humanity's sake. And so I got my backpack and I got a little canteen, because my parents got me that to make me feel like an explorer. And, if you're imagining the little dude from Pixar's Up, you're on target, okay? So it's not too long until I find this trail, and it's a tunnel really into this thicket of bushes. And so I head on in, and it gets narrower and narrower until just when I think I'm going to have to turn back, it opens up onto a bluff overlooking the mighty Stanislaus River. And at that moment, I'm sure that I am the first European ever to set eyes on that place. I am literally Lewis and Clark. And so it's this intense curiosity and desire to explore the world that ultimately leads me to my fateful moment out there in the desert. So now it's January 1985, and I'm looking at the course schedule at my college, and I see this field course in the geography and natural history of Death Valley, California. And I think, college credit for camping, hiking, and exploring the desert? Sign me up, who knew? So the professor was Dr. Ida Bowers, an amazing woman who would later become my mentor and my friend. But much to her dismay, I would just take off any chance I got to go explore the desert. I mean, I'd say, I'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then next thing I know, I'm 2 miles out there. I just can't help myself. And I can hear Dr. Bowers now. Oh, John, I really wish you wouldn't disappear like that. But it becomes like this weird Pavlovian conditioning, because every time I wander off, I find some amazing thing. And so I just keep wandering off. So, for example, Dr. Bowers takes us way off the beaten path to visit this little-known spot with Native American rock art. And, of course, I wander even farther off, and I find this petroglyph, this etching in the rock of 2 life-size human handprints. So I go find Dr. Bowers and I drag her to show her, and she's stunned. She'd never seen it nor anything like it. The rest of the class is amazed. So another time I go off on walkabout way out there, and I find this little patch of really weird wildflowers. They're like these little fuzzy cabbages. And so, again, I drag the whole class out to see them, and it turns out it's the rare Death Valley bear poppy. The professor had only ever seen him in a book. Yet another time, we're exploring this dry stream bed at the bottom of this deep canyon where we're supposed to stay. And of course, I head straight up this steep slope. I disappear to go exploring. And at one point, I take a pause at this rocky ledge to catch my breath. And I look down, and there's this big, fat lizard impaled on a spine at the center of a cactus, belly up, dripping with blood. And I think, what in the fresh hell is this? Like, I am completely freaked out. I have been dropped into my own private horror movie. So I get the hell out of there. I scramble back down to rejoin the group. And later that day, after some research, it turns out that I have witnessed the rarely seen mating display of the loggerhead shrike, otherwise known as the butcher bird. And so at this point, my fellow students see me as, like basically a natural history rock star. I'm pretty much the secret cosmic love child of Jane Goodall and Charles Darwin. And so, the next time I wander off, I'm expecting the next big rush of discovery. What's it gonna be? Bring it on. Like, I'm thinking maybe a bighorn sheep giraffe hybrid, or maybe a living pterodactyl, or maybe one of those Dr. Seuss style truffula trees with an actual lorax in it. But there's nothing. Nothing. And so this is where my thinking really goes sideways. Because I need my next fix. I need that next big rush of discovery. And then I see it. A big, fat, stubby, cotton-top barrel cactus. So here's the deal. I had long wondered just how much liquid there was inside of a cactus. And I'm pretty sure it all goes back to when I was 6 years old watching the Flintstones. One of the finest Stone Age themed cartoons ever. It's a short list, I know. And in season 1, episode 5, Fred Flintstone drinks this stuff called cactus cooler. And my 6-year-old brain immediately assumes that there must be drinkable quantities of liquid inside every cactus. And so, alone out there in the desert, my lifetime curiosity finally reaches its breaking point, and I just have to know. Like, I'm imagining a gusher. I'm imagining so much liquid I could keep my pet goldfish in there. And I know it's wrong, but I start to rationalize, it's probably only a misdemeanor. It's not really endangered. I'm doing this for science. And so I pull out my pocket knife. Now, there's something else I have to describe here. The cotton-top cactus has these long, rigid, curving spines that overlap and weave together, creating what I like to refer to as the interlocking armor of death. Its closest relative is called the horse crippler. And so my little pocket knife does nothing. So then I start to look around and I find a rock about the size of a bowling ball and I throw it at it. And it just bounces off like a little pebble. The cactus is unscathed. And so now I got to get serious. And I look around and I find the biggest fucking boulder that I could possibly hoist over my head. And I square up on that cactus and I bring it down hard. Splat. It's a direct hit. So I crouch down and I push that boulder out of the way and I pull back chunks of that spiny armor and bloody my hands a bit in the process. And I put my hand inside. And so, what do I learn on this fateful day? What new piece of knowledge do I gain from this experience? Well, the inside of that cactus is kinda, sorta, just a tiny bit damp. That's it. No gusher, no cactus cooler. And I think to myself, you've got to be shitting me. I've just murdered this cactus for nothing? What a jackass move. And I stand there and the guilt begins to wash over me and settle in. And I don't feel like a natural history rock star anymore. And when I go back to join the group, I don't tell anyone what I've done, especially Dr. Bowers. She still doesn't know. And for the rest of that field course, I follow directions. I follow all directions. Well, in the 3.5+ decades since that infamous day, I have been fortunate enough to return to Death Valley many times. First, as a teaching assistant for Dr. Bowers, and then later as a professor with my very own students. And at some point early on, I had to decide whether or not I was going to tell them about my crime. And I decided to lean into it. And so, in an ongoing effort to turn colossal stupidity into a teachable moment, I have told a shortened version of this story probably over 100 times in the classroom and in the field. And I gotta say that students really love it when their professor looks like a dumbass. And as I say to them, if you're curious about how much liquid there is inside of a cactus, you don't have to repeat my mistake. Because my curiosity killed the cactus so that yours doesn't have to. Thank you.
You're so far away.
That's my uncle. I love that. Oh man, I love that story. Thank you for sharing it with us tonight.
How are you with plants?
Oh, embarrassing, really. I have a tendency to murder them. I've been really liking being here and seeing all the cacti, aloe type looking things. I'm like, these things look robust. Like I could maybe keep them alive. But it's particularly embarrassing for me because my dad, by profession, is a landscaper. Been a landscaper my whole life. Very good with plants. I don't
Tell
know.
us more.
I don't know how he would feel about crushing one with a boulder. But his favorite advice to anyone is cut it back, cut it back, cut it back. And
Right.
I became obsessed in my 20s with like rescuing plants from bars.
Okay, that sounds.
If I saw people,
that sounds noble.
If I saw people pouring beer into them or
Uh-huh.
just like not treating them well, I would just put them under my big ass winter coat because I'm in Canada, and like take them home and take good care of them.
So you stole the plants. Got it.
Correct.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
I was a thief. And
Plant stealer.
I had
Interesting.
some beautiful plants. My roommates would also participate in this. So we had like
Oh, there's
what's it
several
called?
plant stealers. Got it. Mhm.
The ones that grow like long pathos?
Pothos?
Pothos.
Pothos, yeah.
Pothos, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had this, my roommates and I, we had like these beautiful plants that would just drape down our kitchen walls. Like everyone would come over and be like,
Stunning.
oh my God, how'd you do that? We're like, we just stopped pouring beer in them. And then my dad came to visit and I left him alone for like 4 minutes while I changed my pants to go out for dinner. So I had more space for food. And when I came back, he had fucking cut it back. He'd cut it bald. And I was like screaming at him, like, what right did you have? That one's not even mine. That's freaking my roommate's. How am I going to explain this to her? We've been growing them for years. And he was just like, need to be cut back and walked away.
Classic
away.
dad move. Just like, you gotta do it.
So not murder quite, but it felt like murder in the moment. I was like, and he had no guilt. So
Yeah.
good for you, John. I'm glad that you
Yeah.
have feelings.
Yeah, I like feel guilty every time I cut my plants back. Wait, round of applause. Like, who feels guilty every time they like trim a plant? Okay. I
I
feel
feel like I know what I'm doing.
I know what I'm doing, but it like still feels wrong. Like I cut a pothos.
Well, they put so much effort into growing.
Yeah, they're doing so well. They're like striving out, and you're like, no, stop growing that way. I don't like it. You're ruining the aesthetic of my apartment.
I'm gonna twist you, turn you over here.
Yeah. All right, should we bring up our second storyteller?
On to the next.
Are you
We're
guys
gonna-
ready? Yes.
We're gonna make an exciting transition from plants to bugs. Is everyone ready? Our next storyteller is a familiar face here at the Exploratorium. Some of you may have seen him give presentations before, so this will be a slightly new twist. But he is an entomologist who loves bugs, and when times get tough, he likes to remind himself that at least he's not a termite who is choking or paralyzed by a toxic fart. And yeah, I think that's good advice for all of us. At least we're not termites choking, paralyzed on a toxic fart. And with no further ado, I will bring up Ralph Washington Jr.
Come on, Ralph.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, y'all want to hear a story? Let's go for a story. Okay. It's late spring in 2012. I'm 2 years out of my bachelor's degree, and I'm working for a small company that tests insect repellents. I'm driving a large white cargo van filled with equipment, and I'm headed to a field site in western Nevada. I'm driving alone because I need time with my thoughts, and right now I'm thinking about leaving the career that I've wanted since I was 8 years old, when insects first stoked the fire of my curiosity. I grew up in a rough neighborhood that didn't have a lot of nature, but it did have a lot of vacant lots, and vacant lots are a fantastic place to find insects. And when I found them in a vacant lot near my house, I realized that you can find wondrous things in even the bleakest of places. And ever since, I assumed that I'd spend my life studying the six-legged. Yet, I'm working with chemicals that keep insects away. And many of them seem like they're just a jump from being true insecticides. And lately, I've struggled to decide on a disciplinary focus, and a lot of the advice I've received has been pretty discouraging. I've been told that I need to choose a practical discipline, and many of the suggestions have been depressingly mechanistic. How can I find the wonder that I longed for as a child? As I travel over the scenic features of the Sierra Nevada, I deeply contemplate the rise and fall of the various peaks in my life. The field site is a snow melt saturated marsh at about 5,000 feet above sea level. It's decorated with hardy shrubs and short trees and framed by beautiful geology. I get there in the late morning because I expect to be there for at least 12 hours. And after a long time on the road, I am eager to stretch my legs. So I swing open the door. I hop off the driver's seat. And I take a deep breath of crisp mountain air when my ears register the insect equivalent of Ride of the Valkyries. Yeah, that's right. I hear and I see that I'm standing in a loudly buzzing horde of six-legged Draculas. Like a cloud masking the sun, the lights darken around me. And innumerable voracious mosquitoes land on my body and start to perform a joint hypodermic massacre. As I feel their mouthparts penetrate my skin, I feel like a baby caribou in the Arctic tundra, beleaguered and in danger of rapid exsanguination. I have never felt so instantaneously and thoroughly itchy. Although I'm exposed for only a minute, the mosquitoes bite through my clothes, and they leave marks. Oh my God, is exactly right. They leave marks on my legs, arms, neck, and face. It's terrible. I get back to the van, and I examine myself in the mirror, and I'm horrified to see welts on my lips, on my eyelids, and even the inside of my nostrils. It is just disrespectful. These mosquitoes have me looking like I just got beat up by nature. So, like most people, I'm not a big fan of mosquito bites, and I'm really mad about the ones on my face. However, I have a plum. So on the outside, I look as cool as the world's bumpiest cucumber. But on the inside, I'm saying to myself, Ralph, you're a damn chump. You could have predicted this. Come on. You could have done a little ecological forecasting if you weren't so preoccupied with your feelings. Number one, you know that Aedes increpitus is the prominent mosquito species in the region. Come on. Number two, you know that it's a wet year, so the increased seasonal precipitation was going to grow the population. Number three, you know that the larvae develop in melted snow, so the adults don't have a lot of time to produce the next generation, which means that they don't drag their tarsi when they're trying to get that red juice. My self-criticism is interrupted when I hear a familiar whine, and I notice that a mosquito has followed me into the van. So I square up on her, prepared to win our rematch via first-round knockout. But I stop short when I realize that I've met her before, many years ago, in a place that's not very far from where I am now. When I was a kid, a family friend took my brothers and me on a backpacking trip in early spring. I remember most of the trip as a blur of novel experiences. None of us had gone camping before, much less sleep in the open under a blanket of stars. Marmots tried to invade our sleeping bags, and we sealed ourselves up like frightened caterpillars. We went fishing for the first time and dined gratefully on a lake trout that we caught. It was the first time that any of us had gone a day without hearing cars, electronics, or the other strident trappings of modern civilization. It was the very first time that the three of us got to sit together in natural peace. On the second day, we're walking around looking for a place to throw rocks, or kids, and we find a small pond filled with frigid water. When we leaned over the surface, we looked at each other, saw the small creatures wriggling within, and asserted confidently that we had discovered aliens. I had never seen mosquito larvae before, and no one had described them to me, so they were entirely novel. I mean, have you ever taken a look at them? They look bizarre. Listen, they have a comically large head, a narrow body covered in bristles, and many of the species, including this one in particular, have a respiratory siphon that makes it look like they have a snorkel poking out of their butt. Silliness. Mosquito larvae look like their body was assembled by Mr. Potato Head. Ridiculous creatures. Yet, my brothers and I were mesmerized. So, we sit there for hours, thinking about them and speculating on their origin. So there I am, savoring. I savor the memory of my brothers and I, laughing together in wonder. And I watch this lone mosquito fly around me on delicate panes of gossamer. And I realize that I am just as curious about her then as the younger version of me was curious about the younger version of her. She has faced great challenges. She spent her immaturity submerged in freezing cold water. She has to acquire a precious resource from a host who is violently reluctant to part with it. And then she has to hastily mate and lay eggs before the water gets too warm for her offspring. She is vulnerable, alone, and lives a life fraught with adversity. So instead of resentfully swatting her, I let her suck 5 micrograms of my blood. I cracked the window just enough to let her escape, and I watch her slowly fly away with the heavy burden that will allow her to produce more of the little aliens that mesmerized me as a child. And I whisper gratitude to her as she leaves, because she's helped me understand what kind of entomologist I want to be. I don't want to be an entomologist who wipes out insects. I want to be one who watches them thrive. Thank you.
Sorry for a mosquito, Jesus. Empathy for a mosquito, no thank you. Evil little bloodsuckers.
Oh my God, Ralph, you're so funny. Earlier tonight, you'll all be really excited to know that Mr. Ralph Washington Jr. Was in the green room with us telling us how our fingernails might have actually evolved to be just like the right size and shape to pluck ticks from one another, particularly if you were, for example, trying to get into someone's butthole. They're just the right size. Isn't that a fun fact? Yeah, who knew?
Don't make them learn. Don't make them learn, Kayla.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, guys, if you need to get into ring soon.
Yeah. In addition to being funny, though, I think it's like pretty mesmerizing that you were able to show that compassion. I know for a fact that Misha would not be able to do that, having gone on a trek with her this summer where we expected a lot of mosquitoes, and I saw the preparation so that none would touch her.
Why are you giving away all my secrets? Number one. Two, if you can't tell, because we're actually like kind of like put together right now, we love backcountry hiking and camping, and my least favorite part about this is obviously bugs. And when we decided to go on a trip to the Yukon this past summer, you know, like the Yukon's known for having like the worst bugs ever. And you were like, "Oh, my friend said it was the worst bug season." So I'm like, "Cool, all the black flies, all the mosquitoes. I'm getting myself a bug net. I'm gonna wear a bug net. Like, I don't care how unfashionable it is wearing one." So I did, and did we see a single mosquito?
Not a single mosquito. So it became just another random thing she really didn't need to bring. like her skincare routine, which was huge.
Okay, don't even. I would like sunscreen, okay? And moisturizer and maybe a face wash. You know what? It's fine. You brought a whole stick of deodorant, so.
That's true. And a woman later tore me apart. She's like in her 60s trekking. She picked up my deodorant and was like, what is this? Why would you pack something so heavy? I was like, I had no idea. What do you do? She's like, I cut off a piece. Oh.
Yeah, she was a badass.
Yeah, she was really badass. I was like, cool. That's
Cool.
good advice.
We're like,
I did
So-
appreciate your lip balm though. So
yeah, you did use my lip
I
balm a
used
lot.
it every day and I'm thankful for it. Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Thank you.
I overpack for a reason. All right, are we ready for our third storyteller? Woo-woo! All right, our next storyteller. He was a high school science teacher. He's moved on from that. He now works at the Exploratorium. Woo! And he does physics circuses. Please give it up for Zeke Crossover. Woo!
As I was walking out of school on a Friday afternoon, I ran into one of my students. He was that kind of kid who always had his feet up on the desk, but whenever I tried to call him out, he knew the answers to all my questions. And I overheard him talking about me as I was leaving. He said, "That guy, he's the most boring asshole I have ever had as a teacher." I didn't even correct his profanity. He was right. Good teachers know how to find out what kids are interested in, find ways to make sure that they can't even avoid learning, but I was not yet that teacher. And even after 5 whole days of teaching, teaching is the only profession where they expect you on your first day to be as good as someone who's been doing it for 20 years. So I decided I needed to do something to have a better lesson on Monday morning. And as I was walking out, I saw the chemical storeroom, which they had given a key to a person who had been teaching for only 5 days. So I opened up the door to the chemical storeroom, and it was filled with many dangerous things. There was hydrochloric acid on the shelf, there was concentrated sulfuric acid, there was sodium hydroxide, there was magnesium wire. But I was thinking that those weren't necessarily the kinds of things that I would do on Monday. What I've been thinking of was an activity that I had seen my high school chemistry teacher do. He had made a substance called nitrogen triiodide, which has the interesting property that when you step on it, it makes a little purple cloud of smoke along with a small explosion. It seemed a perfect way to catch the interest of my students. And so I looked around on the shelves and discovered what I remembered to be the ingredients for it, which was iodine powder and concentrated ammonia. Now, this was a long time ago, before the internet, so I couldn't really look up the recipe or the safety concerns that went along with this. You all are laughing. You didn't have the confidence of a mediocre white guy to go with this. So I picked up the things that I needed for it and left to go home. And I was going to practice on this Friday evening, and I was going to work all weekend so that I would have the perfect lesson come Monday morning. Now, the first thing I needed to do was to mix up the iodine powder and the concentrated ammonia. So I grabbed a glass mixing bowl out of the kitchen, brought it outside. You know, it's an explosive. I brought it outside and put it in the bowl, stirred it up, put down a couple of napkins, scraped it out of the bowl and the napkins into the driveway, and I knew I needed to wait. See, the interesting property of nitrogen triiodide is that when it's wet, it's completely safe. But when it's dry, then that's when it will explode. So I've got a wet pile of it. I need to wait a while. So I wait about an hour. I come back and, poke it. Nothing happens. So I wait another hour. This time I get a stick and I poke it. and nothing happens. So I go back inside to start wondering what I should be doing next, because I really want to be a good science teacher. Science had opened up my eyes to the world, let me see the world as it actually is, and I wanted to help impart that to my students. And so I was determined to be successful, but this was not working either. So I got around to tracking down my own high school science teacher by calling a bunch of different people who led me to other people who led me to other people, and I finally got him on the phone. And so I'm asking him lots of information about how to be a good science teacher, and he's going on with me, and we talk for a long time, maybe 45 minutes or so, and I finally get around to asking him about, what if I want to do something a little dramatic in class? And he's like, well, what are you thinking? And he says, well, I was thinking about making nitrogen triiodide. How would you might go about that? And he said, making nitrogen triiodide? I wouldn't make that. And I'm like, well, what if I actually really want to make nitrogen triiodide? What should I do? He says, well, I wouldn't make more than a teaspoon of it. And I'm talking a teaspoon here. And I'm looking at a mound the size of my fist drying. What other advice could you give me? Well, when you mix it up, you have to be very careful that you don't leave even a crystal of it underneath your fingernail, because when it dries under there, it'll blow your fingernail off. So I get off that call, and I go to the sink, and I wash my hands in a way that no one since Lady Macbeth has ever done. And then I look out the window, and there's a pile of nitrogen triiodide there, and somebody has to deal with it. That's going to be me. So I think I need protective gear. I decide that a winter coat might be helpful. It's squishy. And then I put on an apron, and I brought home a smock, so I put that on. I have a bicycle helmet, I put that on my head. I do have safety glasses, so I put those on. But remembering the fingernail issue, I got a pair of yellow rubber dishwashing gloves to put on my hands, and I go out to face the nitrogen triiodide. Remembering that when it's wet, it's safe, my thought was, I just need to get it wet again. So I think to myself, I could just flood the driveway. Like I could take the hose and put it on the driveway and just send water everywhere. But if I do that, and it works, then I'm just going to spread the nitrogen triiodide everywhere, and then I'm going to have to figure out how to clean that up. And so that seems like a bad idea. Maybe if I mist the water down on top of it, then that will work. Like I can get it wet faster than I can agitate it. That was my goal. And so I take the hose on the finest mist setting, and it's become evening by this point. And so when the water comes out of the hose and goes up into the air, it glitters like diamonds in the streetlights. And it slowly flutters down and hits the nitrogen triiodide, and it doesn't go boom. Boom is the sound of explosions when you're far away. It goes crack. And then that is the last thing I would hear for many hours. I could hear nothing. I look down, and there are chunks of concrete all around me, and a hole the size of a bowling ball. Then I assess myself. I'm dry. And that is good in all the ways. And then I notice something else start to happen. the lights of my neighbors start to turn on. Blink, 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 blink. And there they see me standing there. I'm wearing a winter coat in October. I've got an apron, a smock, a bicycle helmet, safety glasses, and yellow rubber dishwashing gloves. I'm just your local mad scientist. Don't worry about me. The interesting bit about this situation is that it actually still had only been the outside of the mound of nitrogen triiodide that was dry. And so it did, in fact, spread it all over the driveway. I didn't know what to do, but nature would solve my problem for me. I moved my car to block the driveway so that my housemates couldn't drive home, and then it started to rain. And every so often a drop would hit a little crystal of nitrogen triiodide, and it would make a little pop, and a little purple cloud of smoke escaped, just like I had damn wanted to have in my class. I didn't work on my lesson the rest of the weekend. And when I came in on Monday morning, I had prepared some notes and some transparencies to use in class. And when I saw my first class of the day and saw their eyes roll with another boring-ass lecture, I decided I couldn't do that again. So I sat down on the desk and told them the story of my weekend. And for once in those 5 days of teaching, I had their rapt attention. And at the end, they had thousands of questions, and some of them were about chemistry. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to.
One more round for Zeke. Come on.
Zeke, I want to know, did you wear purple on purpose tonight?
We got on a call with Zeke, and we were like, all right, tell us your story. And it was pretty much already that good. And we were like, cool, thanks for making our jobs really easy. That's amazing.
Yeah. I wish my chemistry teacher in school was that cool, but no.
Yeah, I would have remembered if my chemistry teacher told me that.
Yeah, if he blew up his own driveway, I would have been into it.
Yeah. Zeke told us that he was later evicted from that home. Whoops.
I wonder why. All right. It is intermission time. So stretch your legs, go get a drink, tip Steve nicely. Hello, hello, hello. I feel like you've all imbibed enough to forget your learning. We're going to start the second half of our show. You ready?
Ooh.
So quiet.
Yeah, like a pin drop.
Ominous.
Welcome back. Welcome back. For all the folks online who are joining us, thank you so much
Thanks
for getting
tuning
things
in.
rolling. We're happy to have you here. Okay, I loved how much great feedback everyone's giving to the storytellers. We love that. They've put in so much work. Let's get a round of applause for our first three. We've got 2 more dope tellers coming your way tonight, and we've got more storytelling opportunities coming your way.
Yeah, so if you've been having fun tonight, there is so many other ways you can enjoy science storytelling. We have, I don't know if you guys know this, but we have a podcast. It's called Story Collider, obviously.
Kind of a big deal.
So big. But yeah, you can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. There's more stories like this. There's all of the science stories, whether it's a scientist who's telling a story or someone who's just had science influence their life.
Or someone who blew up their driveway one time by accident.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have that story on this podcast yet. But like soon.
Be soon.
Yeah, we also have other shows. So I don't know if you guys are from here or from out of town, but Story Collider is in 13 different home cities. We're in all across the U.S. We have Atlanta, L.A., New York, Boston, Seattle,
Dallas.
Yeah, we got Dallas. We have Texas. Y'all. We're also in Canada. We got Vancouver, Toronto, which is where I'm from.
Yeah, give us a shout out if you're ever in town. Yep.
Yeah, we love stories. If you ever want to tell a science story, reach out to us at stories@storycollider.org. We love all stories, all story pitches. I don't know. I just love.
We'll work with you on it.
Yeah,
okay?
you don't ever have to have told a story before. You can just come to us and be like, I have a moment to share about my life. And we're like, amazing, thank you. And it works out great.
Like, not sure if there's any science in this story? Don't worry, we'll find it for you. There's science everywhere and everything.
Exactly. And, okay, so the closest next Story Collider show is happening in Sacramento. Yes, John is a part of all of this. It's the reason that it's happening. And John, do you want to shout out what date it's happening? April 14th. Yes, April 14th. We're having a show in Sacramento, California. So if you're into it, go check it out. It's going to be a good night.
Hell yeah, I wish I could go.
Yeah. Me too. I mean,
we'll be back up north.
yeah, I'll be in the snow. It's fine. Woo. All right. Shall we? Is it time for Storyteller?
It is. It's gonna be epic. Yeah, let's hype them.
Hype it up.
Hype it up.
Y'all are great.
Yeah, thanks. You're amazing. Our next storyteller has a PhD. It's a pretty big deal.
That takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. It's a PhD in no big deal chemical engineering, something I personally could never do. She's also a senior scientist here at the Exploratorium. Woo-woo! She's out there bringing you content and ideas and fun stuff to do, and then she brings some of that fun interactive learning to teachers so that they can bring the same ideas to the classroom, which is phenomenal.
That's dope.
Yeah, like that's amazing work. And she's interesting in a lot of other ways, which you're going to learn about. Please welcome to the stage, Julie Yu.
Woo, Julie! Woo!
Hi, friends. I love noodles. Once I had to do an icebreaker where we were asked to identify the single food that we'd be willing to survive on for the rest of our lives if we were on a desert island. Like, what food island would we choose? And normally, I hate icebreakers. I don't like to talk about myself, but this one was easy for me. My food island is Noodle Island. In my culture, noodles symbolize long life, and everyone in my family eats noodles on everyone else's birthday, and I've had noodles every single birthday of my life. Now, growing up, I had equal love for spaghetti and Italian pasta as I did for the white, chewy noodles in Chinese cuisine. And once when I was about 10, I asked my mom why the two types of noodles were different colors. And she said, Italian noodles are made with eggs, and so they might be a little more yellow, but our noodles are made with just flour and water. And I thought to myself, if noodles are just flour and water, why don't they fall apart when you cook them in water? Now, I was a pretty shy and quiet kid and kept to myself a lot, and spent a lot of time even at home by myself. That was more acceptable in those days for kids. So I'd come home after school and heat a hot dog in the microwave or make some instant ramen by putting it in a bowl with hot water and covering it with a plate for a couple of minutes. That's right. And then I'd eat everything and clean it all up before anyone got home and be ready to go for another meal by dinner time. So one afternoon, I was still thinking about what my mom had said. and thinking to myself, like, if noodles are really just flour and water, why don't they fall apart when you cook them in water? And so I thought I'd try to find out. So I took some flour, added water, and mashed it all together. And then I picked off little balls of dough and rolled them into long noodly shapes with my hands. And then I set a pot of water on the stove and started the long wait for the electric coil of our stove to turn from black to bright orange. I'd made quite a mess at this point, and so I was a little nervous that someone might come home, so I'm glancing back and forth between the clock and the pot. And fortunately, this was before I learned that a watched pot never boils, and ignorance is bliss, so the water did indeed boil, and I was able to take my freshly made noodles and drop them into the pot of boiling water, really mostly expecting everything to turn into a cloudy mess. But it didn't. The noodles stayed intact, and I watched in amazement as I poked at them with my chopsticks, and like not even the edges were dissolving, and they started to look like real noodles. So I took one, pulled it out, and tasted it. It was delicious. This thing was amazing, and I know now that it was seasoned with triumph, but in that moment, I thought to myself, I am never going to go hungry again. I will be able to make noodles for myself whenever I want for the rest of my life. And so I took all the noodles out, added some soy sauce, and slurped away the evidence. Indeed, noodles were just flour and water, and they don't fall apart when you cook them in water. A few years later, I was getting ready to make a pot of spaghetti, and by this time, I was more proficient with the stove, and I was also spending as much time as possible in front of the TV, which was in the living room. So cooking meant going back and forth between the kitchen and the living room, just depending on what needed attention. And cooking a pot of spaghetti meant putting a pot of water on the stove to boil, going to watch TV, coming back during the commercial break and adding the dried pasta, going to watch TV, maybe stirring it in the meantime, but mostly waiting the 10 or so minutes for the noodles to cook and hoping that that timing didn't coincide with a really critical moment of the show. This particular time, my dad was home and milling about, and everyone knew it was public knowledge by now that I used the stove, so it didn't really slow me down. Put the pot of water on the stove, TV time. When the commercial came, I went back to the kitchen, and I returned to a pot of water that was not yet boiling. There were a couple of bubbles at the bottom, but nowhere near a full boil. My show was going to start again, so I took the spaghetti and went ahead and put it in the pot. This time, it's hard to put spaghetti in a little pot, and so half of it was stuck under the water and half of it was left sticking out of the water, but I was fine with that. Went back to the TV. My dad was usually pretty oblivious to what I was doing, but he encountered this, and he yelled from the kitchen, "你在干嘛?" Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to wait for all the water to boil and then push the noodles down into the pot. So I run back to the kitchen, and by this time the submerged portion had softened enough so that I could tip over the part that was sticking out and shove it under the water. And, this action appeased my dad, who was now standing there supervising, and I chose not to say anything. But the whole time I was thinking in my head, I know this is gonna work. I've done this before. As long as you come back and mix it during the commercial break, all the pasta will cook. And it did. I'd continue to experiment through cooking at home and then more formally through many more years of school. In the kitchen, I'd come to learn the molecular mechanisms around gluten formation and why noodles don't fall apart. In the lab, I'd learned the molecular mechanisms around how viruses work on my way to a PhD in chemical engineering. I'd end up in a job that was primarily about science teaching and learning, working in a place that was neither home nor school, but something in between. Pasta would re-enter my experimental life during the pandemic. So early on in the pandemic, I was cooking all my meals at home, and I was just generally pretty preoccupied with food, thinking about like what I would need in case I got sick and needed to not interact with the world for a couple of weeks. And I think food and cooking was a coping mechanism, trying to have some control over something. But I remember being in the store and wanting to stock up on dried spaghetti. And from the look of the shelves, I wasn't alone. Professionally, I was also thinking about food. Like a lot of folks, I was trying to translate my work from being in person to online, and ideally in a way that supported people in what was a pretty challenging time. And so I started wondering and thinking about whether experimentation in the kitchen could help people think about science while they were stuck at home. And all of that really in service of a belief that most of the world is understandable, and that eventually we would come to a better understanding of what we were all experiencing. A package of dry spaghetti tells you to boil it for 10 to 12 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. I've been doing it my whole life. And there are nights I do not have the energy for that. So my first noodle adventure had shown me that fresh pasta cooks in seconds, and of course does not fall apart in water. The spaghetti cooking that my dad questioned showed me that noodles will soften even if the water isn't fully boiling. It just takes a little longer. So I started to wonder if the softening part could be separated from the cooking part. Took some dried spaghetti, put it in a long dish, and covered it with water from the tap. An hour later, the noodles were soft enough so that they curved rather than broke when I bent them. Another hour later, the noodles were fully soft and pliable so that they sunk from their own weight, and they turned this white pasty color. I tried one. It was disgusting. All of this had happened at room temperature, so the noodles were rehydrated, but they were not yet cooked. Took some of the rehydrated noodles, put it in a bowl, and covered it with water that I had heated in an electric kettle, and something amazing happened. Within seconds, the noodles turned from the white pasty color to taking on a yellowish hue. And when I pulled one out, it had the texture of al dente pasta. Most importantly, it tasted just like spaghetti that had been boiled in water for 10 to 12 minutes. And so this appealed to my heart in two ways. First, pre-soaking noodles takes a little more planning, but it only takes seconds to set up, and then you can walk away and do whatever you need to do. When you come back, it also cooks in seconds, so the total hands-on time is pretty minimal. Second, once the noodles are rehydrated, they only need to come up to temperature, so you only need enough water to just barely cover them. And not heating a giant pot of water to boiling not only saves you time, it more importantly saves you and the earth energy. Pre-soaking reduces the carbon footprint of pasta cooking. Now, watching those noodles change color and tasting that first noodle was like a Proustian moment for me. It transported me back to being 10 years old with a sweet taste of triumph as I ate my mashed noodles. This time, though, I didn't keep the question in my head or the evidence in my stomach. I shared it in the most public of ways, on YouTube. With the help of my colleagues, we created an entire video series about curiosities I've had in the kitchen my whole life but never talked about. We shot the videos in my backyard, dancing around each other, like trying to stay socially distant in those early, uncertain days of the pandemic. And with folks stuck at home and on social media, those videos became some of our most watched content that year and continued to be. So it was in a time of greatest physical separation that one of my most personal loves, cooking, became my most public work. Thank you.
Oh, man. Wait, okay. I need to know, round of applause, who's changing the way they're cooking spaghetti now? Yeah. I mean, I feel like Italians might be mad about it. Maybe?
I don't care. I'm doing it. I'm also a big fan of multitasking with the TV. So I'm a big fan of this whole thing where it's like, oh, I can just keep watching and this is going to take care of itself.
Yeah.
Great. I'm not
That
going to light
sounds-
anything on fire.
Do you light things on fire in the
Yeah,
kitchen?
sometimes. It's not a big deal. We don't have to talk about it.
Okay. You know, it's fine.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
fine. Okay, one more round of applause for Julie, y'all, please. If you're not familiar with Julie's work, I mean, you've seen it here at the Exploratorium, but you can go on YouTube and you can check out those videos. You can see her dancing around in her backyard making cool food stuff.
I hope there's actual dancing. I feel like that was a metaphor, or like, what's the other word? Simile?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I can't help you here.
Be English.
Metaphorical.
Metaphorical dancing.
Metaphorical.
Maybe it's real dancing. I imagine like an English jig kind of a thing. It doesn't matter.
Wow. Wow, Misha.
I'm having a time.
Yeah, you're having a time.
All right. Are we ready for our final storyteller? Yes. All right.
More.
You might know her as Laser Chick. Yes.
Some fans.
You might also know her as the resident Exploratorium staff physicist. But we all know her as Desiree Whitmore. Woo!
Yeah, I think this is okay. Hola. Lasers. March 14th, 2015 at 9:26 a.m. This date and time are memorable to me because they're the first 7 digits of pi. And it was my very first time celebrating Pi Day. So I baked a pie, bring it to work. I set it on the table next to all my colleagues' beautiful pies. It smells amazing in our office. 9:26 comes. It's time to start slicing into some pies. Not a single person cuts into my pie. Boo. So I was a little confused and kind of hurt. Like, what's going on? I don't understand. I really was putting in some work on this, you know? And then I hear really loudly one of my colleagues, who on earth baked a square pie for Pi Day? What on earth were you thinking? Actually, I thought a lot about what kind of pie to make. Okay? I was like, okay, this is my first Pi Day. It has to be important. And it's about the number pi, right? That's what we're celebrating. The number pi is represented by this Greek letter, pi. So I thought my pie needs to be Greek. I'm going to make spanakopita, right? Yeah, right? I need that spinach and that feta and that phyllo. And it never occurred to me to make a spanakopita in any other shape than a square. Because that's how I've always eaten it. So I never even thought about that. So I explained this to my colleagues. I say, no, that's my pie. It's a spanakopita. And it's Greek. It's the number pi. They don't care. The teasing actually just gets worse. And they still don't eat my pie, right? So then it's like, oh, Desiree, are you sure you're even a real physicist? How could you, how could you not know to make a round pie to celebrate Pi Day? And normally, you know, this is like general banter between friends. It's totally fine, right? But this was a little different from me, okay? They were like attacking my validity as a physicist. And, you know, this was my first job outside of a laboratory, right? I'm not the laser chick anymore. I'm like the curriculum chick. And I'm sitting here in this office. I'm normally, throughout my entire schooling, I was very often the only black person, or the only Latina person, or the only woman. And I was always the only Blaxican woman. Don't even get me started, right? And so there was always something or someone to make me feel like I didn't belong for one reason or another. And oftentimes, my voice was unheard or silenced. My ideas were stolen or dismissed. And I was referred to as a talented minority woman scientist, which made me feel like I wasn't a real scientist at all. But now I'm at the Lawrence Hall of Science, surrounded by teachers and scientists and education specialists, and my voice is valued, right? My voice is not only heard, but it's amplified, and I'm treated like a real scientist. I'm a talented physicist. No extra adjectives necessary, right? And I felt like I had made it. I finally belonged somewhere. Until, that is, March 14th, 2015 at 9:26 a.m. What their teasing did was it reminded me of all of those feelings of exclusion, all of that imposter syndrome that I felt all throughout my schooling. And it made me just shut down. And I was like, screw Pi Day. Pi Day's stupid. I don't care about no Pi Day. That's dumb. I'm not going to celebrate that ever again. And I didn't. I do not celebrate Pi Day. 3 years later, I come to the Exploratorium as their staff physicist. The Exploratorium invented Pi Day. Physicist Larry Shaw invented Pi Day here in the 80s. And I don't know if you know this, but we get down on Pi Day. We have parades with live music. We have events. We have online programming and all kinds of activities for people of all ages. And of course, we have a lot of pie to eat, right? And every year, I participate in the programming. I march in the parade with my little number. I eat the pie because I'm going to eat some pie, right? But I don't have a connection with the holiday. So I do it because it's my job. I'm getting paid to be there on Pi Day. And if you're going to pay me to march in a parade, I'm going to do that, right? So I do that, but I don't have this connection, and I can't quite figure out why. And then in 2021, in the middle of the global pandemic, we're all at home, and I get this email in my inbox. And it's like, hey, Exploratorium staff, we're going to have a talk by this amazing artist named John Sims. He likes to blend math and art together. And I was like, yo, I'm so in, right? This sounds amazing. Also, there's a picture of John Sims in the email. And he is a black man, a black mathematician artist. And as I mentioned before, being the only black person in a space, even a virtual one, can be extremely isolating and lonely. So I was going to this talk, right? I was going to make sure my camera was on. He was going to see me. I was going to ask questions. He was going to know that a black scientist worked at this museum and was interested in his work. So I did, and it was an amazing talk. I'm sitting on my couch in my pajamas, as you do in 2021, and I'm watching this talk, and I am completely enthralled by everything that this man is saying. He's talking about this knot theory that he did where he actually made real knots with this artist. He's talking about fractals. He's talking about this Confederate flag thing that he did where he took the Confederate flag and changed the colors to black, green, and red, which are the colors of the black nationalist flag. And he made a huge ruckus in the South, made people real mad. Yeah, it was pretty dope. And then he gets to his magnum opus. It's called Square Roots, a Quilted Manifesto. This is a vast body of work that includes music and poetry and hand-sewn dresses and quilts, all dedicated to the number pi. So he took the digits 0 through 9, and he assigned each one of those a different color. And then he made a square spiral, starting with 3 in the center, and then 1 above it, and then 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, etc. All the way out, he worked with this Amish community to make a giant 8-foot by 8-foot quilt, which is beautiful. It looked like a giant mixed up Rubik's Cube. And I was completely stunned. And I'm like, wait a minute, time out. My heart is racing all fast in my chest, and I'm like, wait, did that man just say that he made a square representation of pi? And he's being celebrated for it because, I was shamed for making my square representation, for daring to make a square pie. So I was like, I need to know this person. And I felt really seen in a way that I wasn't before. And I was like, I need to meet this guy. But, we're in a pandemic, so whatever. A year later, the museum's open. So 2022, guess who comes to the museum to be an artist in residence? John Sims. Yeah. And so he comes to the museum, and I'm like, yo, I need to meet you. And he was like, yo, I remember you from my Zoom call. I need to meet you too. And so we actually got to meet here at the museum, and it was fantastic. He's amazing. And he tells me, I tell him how much his work meant to me and how amazing his work is and how I resonated with so many different facets of it. And then he tells me, well, at my core, I'm really a community builder. I like to mix people up from different walks of life, put them together, and see what kind of chemistry happens. So I'm putting together this event this weekend for Pi Day. And I'm going to have, right, this is the day before Pi Day. He's like, it's called Poetry, Pie, and Pie. You get it? Yeah, it's really cute. And he's like, I'm going to have myself on stage reciting my own poetry about the number pi. I'm going to have the poet laureate of San Francisco, Tongo Eisen Martin, on stage. Yeah. I'm going to have the first poet laureate from Oakland, Ayodele Nzinga, on stage. And I'm going to have the founder of Patisserie Pies, Janelle St. Jean, on stage. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds amazing. And he was like, yes, trust me, these are his words. This is going to be the blackest celebration of Pi Day that has ever existed. Yeah. And I was like, that sounds amazing, and I would love to be there, right? And he goes, yes, you're going to come and you're going to meet all these amazing artists. 2 days later, I get a phone call from John. This is like 2 days before the event. He calls me. He's like, Desiree, I have a brilliant idea. I would be honored if the Exploratorium's own Black woman physicist would join us on stage and share with us her reflections on pi. Yeah, right? That's great. I was like, no, no. I don't have reflections on pi. I'm not that kind of physicist. I'm not very creative, and I'm not good with words. I do math, and I build lasers, right? Not a lot of pi involved there. And he was like, well, that's nonsense, and I think that you will be great on stage, so I want you to be there. And because of my complete awe and respect for this man, I was like, okay, I got you. I'll come and do it. But then, the night before the event, I have nothing. I don't have reflections on pi. I was like, maybe I could tell a story about pi, like the history of pi, but I'm not going to do that. That's not very Desiree. And everybody does that already for Pi Day. Nobody wants to hear it again and again and again. I mean, maybe some people do, but I'm not going to be the one to deliver it, okay? And I'm not going to get up there, and I'm not going to tell, like, oh, well, I use pi as a button on my calculator, and I just don't, I don't have a connection to pi. And then it hit me that what John was doing here was he was putting these particular people on stage together to see what came of it, right? He wanted to create this special space that was never going to be repeated because those 4 people were going to be on stage. He wanted them to each get up there and present themselves and their work. So what he was asking me to do was not to get up there and recite some random story or some history of pi. He was asking me to, like, be myself on stage. That was a lot. I was like, okay. But then it hit me like, okay, so what he's asking me to do is just like to share who I am in some way on that stage with those other beautiful artists. And so I started thinking, well, why can't I do this? Why do I have this block? I don't have a connection to pi. And then I realized, it's the Spanakopita incident. Spanakopita stopped me from caring about pi. I don't care about it. I've erased it from my memory. And so I decided that's what I'm going to share, because that's the only reflection that I have on pi. I was a little terrified because I haven't told many people that story. But I wasn't sure how I was going to go in an audience, like a bunch of people. But I was like, you know what? This is a chance to talk about imposter syndrome and to talk about the importance of representation and inclusion in STEM. And it was a chance for me to showcase and show them what joy and validity I got from learning about John Sims and his work. So I did it. Yeah. But I was like, I'm just going to go to bed now. And like, it's fine. I'll wake up in the morning and go and tell the story. So I got up in the morning. I come to the museum. I'm terrified. Am I really going to tell this story? This is an awful story. Am I really going to get on stage and tell this to a bunch of strangers? And like, why didn't I write anything down? Like, do I even remember what happened? Oh my God, what are you thinking? And then John Sims comes up to me and he's like, welcome. Let me introduce you to my friends. And he takes me into the back in the green room where you guys don't get to go. And we get to talking about science and art and how they feed off of each other and how they need each other to thrive. And all of my nervousness completely vanished. I felt this sense of belonging. I felt like I was supposed to be there. I was not scared anymore. And I got up on the stage and I started sharing my story, and it was just natural as a square spanakopita. Right? It felt really good. And I realized, like, I was being creative, which I was afraid that I wasn't. I was being genuine, which I needed to be always. And I was being vulnerable. And I realized in that moment on stage, telling this story, that what John Sims had given me was the opportunity to heal myself around this traumatic experience that I had. And now he's given me this beautiful, joyous event to replace that one. So now, Pi Day 2023, 8 years after March 14th, 2015, I'm going to celebrate Pi Day. Like for real celebrate. Right? Yeah. I'm going to bake a spanakopita, my second spanakopita ever, in a square. And I'm going to celebrate the life and work of John Sims and the change that he allowed me to make in myself. Thank you.
Give it up for Desiree and Spanakopita. All right, we want to say
fuck those people who criticized your Spanakopita in the first place. Fuck those people.
I would have eaten that Spanakopita. Spanakopita is delicious. Yes. Fuck those people. You're welcome.
It's the kind of energy we need. Fuck those people. All right.
That time of the night.
It's that time of the night, folks. So we start saying, well, fuck those people, but also our gratitude to those who are good people.
Yeah, we say so many thank yous. So we want to thank Sam Sharkland so much for bringing us here. Thank you so much, Sam. We want to thank Bella Mello for also helping out. We want to just thank the Exploratorium in general for just having us. This is fucking amazing.
For everyone that works here and is attending tonight, thank you for the special work that you do. That's freaking awesome. Round of applause for everyone that works here at the Exploratorium.
Woo!
Brings you nights like these.
We want to thank our tech up in the booth up there, Wayne. Thank you. And we want to thank the videographers who are around. We want to thank our photographer, Ida.
Yeah, Ida!
Woo-woo! Who else do we want to thank?
We want to keep your eyes out, everyone, for photos from tonight from Ida. We want to definitely thank our crew at Story Collider who holds us down, including Misha here, but also our executive director, Erin, and Lindsay, and all the beautiful people that help bring us to these shows.
Yeah, and we want to thank you, the audience, for coming out, supporting our storytellers. Thank you, you beautiful people. And
most importantly,
yeah,
we want to thank the 5 storytellers who put time and effort.
They shared their lives, their souls, their vulnerabilities here on stage. Give it up.
Yes.
Woo!
We're so lucky to work with you talented people. We're so blown away. Every single one of you. Hope you pitch more stories.
Yeah, if you seriously come chat to us if you ever want to tell a story on a stage or just ever in general. We're here for you. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This has been great. This has been awesome. Have a good night.
Enjoy it.
Thank you, everyone.